What if a single, impulsive act of defiance at a glittering corporate gala could shatter a carefully constructed life, unmasking a web of deceit and igniting a chain of events that would force a powerful CEO to confront his own vulnerabilities? This is a story of unexpected encounters, hidden agendas, and a love that blossoms in the most unlikely of circumstances. Victoria Miller sighed as she adjusted her borrowed black dress in the cramped employee bathroom mirror. At 28, she had spent 3 long years as a sales associate at Lombardi & Sons Fine Jewelry, one of Chicago's most prestigious establishments. Her meager salary barely covered her ailing mother's medical bills and the rent on their tiny apartment in a working-class neighborhood. But the job, at least, was stable. The annual company gala always made her nervous. Seeing the executives in their expensive suits and their wives dripping in jewels was a stark reminder of how far removed she was from their glittering world. This year, she had hesitated to attend, but her boss insisted it was important for making connections. As she reapplied her pale pink lipstick, she thought about how she'd ended up here. After her father abandoned them, she'd had to drop out of college to work. She still dreamed of finishing her business administration degree, but for now, that seemed like an impossible fantasy. The ballroom of the Four Seasons Hotel sparkled with golden lights and floral arrangements that cost more than her monthly salary. In a corner, Matthew Lombardi, the CEO of the company, chatted with a group of distinguished guests. At 35, he had transformed the family business into an empire. Tall, with sharp features and always impeccably dressed, he was known as much for his business acumen as for his coldness in personal relationships. Victoria watched him from afar as she sipped a glass of champagne. The contrast between them couldn't be more obvious. He had been born with a silver spoon in his mouth. She had grown up in a humble neighborhood on the city's outskirts. The night progressed without incident until she saw him enter. James Bell, her ex-boyfriend and former manager at the jewelry store, strolled through the doors with a stunning woman on his arm. Victoria's heart clenched as she remembered how he had left her 6 months ago, coldly stating he needed someone more aligned with his position. The couple approached to greet Matthew. James glanced at Victoria, a smug, superior smile playing on his lips. Rage and humiliation churned in Victoria's stomach, mixing with the champagne. Without thinking, she set her glass down on a nearby table and walked purposefully towards the group. She wouldn't let James make her feel insignificant. Not tonight. What happened next would change her life forever. Though at that moment, she had no idea. Have you ever done something impulsive out of anger or hurt, only to realize the consequences were far greater than you imagined? Share your experiences in the comments below. What if a moment of impulsive revenge led to an unimaginable mistake, throwing you into the path of the most powerful man in the room and setting in motion a chain of events that could cost you everything? With her pride wounded and adrenaline coursing through her veins, Victoria Miller did the unthinkable. She grabbed the arm of the closest man and kissed him. Only when she pulled away and saw the stunned, assessing eyes of Matthew Lombardi himself, did she realize her terrible, catastrophic error. Time seemed to stop in the glittering ballroom. Victoria felt the floor tilt beneath her feet as she processed what she had just done. Her lips tingled, and Matthew's expensive cologne still lingered in her senses. Around them, hushed murmurs and astonished stares from the other guests pierced her like daggers. James Bell, the original target of her impulsive act of defiance, stood with his mouth agape, utterly flabbergasted. His stunning companion hid a mocking smile behind her champagne flute. But what unnerved Victoria most was Matthew's expression. He showed no anger, no amusement, only a calculated, unnerving curiosity that made her feel like an insect under a microscope. "Miss Miller," he said finally, his voice so controlled, so devoid of emotion, it was impossible to guess his thoughts. "Could we speak for a moment, in private?" Before she could respond, a wave of nausea washed over Victoria. The combination of alcohol, overwhelming shame, and sheer panic was too much. She turned and fled towards the restroom, ignoring the voices calling after her. She locked herself in a stall and vomited until only tears and bitter regret remained. "What have I done?" she whispered, slumping against the cold tile floor. I just kissed my boss, the owner of the company, Matthew freaking Lombardi. After what felt like an eternity, she managed to pull herself together and looked in the mirror. Her makeup was smeared, and the borrowed dress had a noticeable wine stain. She was the very picture of the disaster she felt inside. She pulled out her phone and called her best friend, Laura, who also worked at the jewelry store but hadn't been able to attend the party. "What am I going to do?" she sobbed when Laura answered. "They're going to fire me tomorrow. How will I pay for Mom's medications? Who's going to hire a crazy woman who kisses her bosses in public?" "Breathe," Laura said, her voice calm and reassuring. "Maybe it's not that bad. Lombardi is different. He's not like James." Victoria laughed, a humorless, broken sound. "Different? He's worse. James was just a manager. Matthew owns everything." When she finally calmed down enough to leave the restroom, the party was still in full swing, but the atmosphere had undeniably changed. People stared and whispered as she passed, some with pity, others with undisguised malice. Matthew was nowhere to be seen. She grabbed her purse and slipped out of the hotel without saying goodbye to anyone. In the taxi on the way home, as the city lights blurred past the window, she could only think of one thing. Tomorrow, she would have to face the consequences of her impulsive act, and she was utterly, terrifyingly unprepared for it. What if the worst mistake of your life led not to ruin, but to an unforeseen opportunity, a chance to change your destiny in a way you never dreamed possible? Could a moment of recklessness open a door to a new future? Monday arrived far too quickly. Victoria Miller entered the jewelry store 40 minutes before her scheduled shift, hoping to avoid the inevitable curious stares. She hadn't slept well all weekend, her mind replaying 1,000 different scenarios of how she would be fired. To her surprise, no one mentioned the incident. Her colleagues greeted her as usual, though she noticed a certain tension in their forced smiles. Mid-morning, while assisting a client looking for an engagement ring, she felt a pair of piercing eyes on her. Matthew Lombardi was observing her from the second floor, where the administrative offices were located. "Miss Miller," Carmen, the executive secretary's voice, startled her. "Mr. Lombardi wants to see you in his office after your lunch break." The rest of the morning was pure torture. She barely managed to eat the sandwich she had brought from home. At 1 o'clock sharp, she ascended the stairs, her legs trembling. Matthew's office was exactly as she imagined. Modern, minimalist, and with a spectacular view of the city. He was standing by the window, dressed in a gray suit that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. "Please sit down," he said without turning. Victoria sank into a black leather chair, bracing herself for the worst. For the next few days, Matthew didn't mention what had happened at the party, but Victoria felt his gaze on her at the most unexpected moments. In a sales team meeting, she noticed him observing her performance with more attention than before. "Miller," he said one afternoon, stopping by her desk, "join me in my office after lunch." Nervously, Victoria arrived on time. "I've been reviewing your file," he began, turning to face her, his expression unreadable. 3 years with the company, consistently high sales, excellent customer feedback." He paused. "I also noticed you abandoned your business administration studies." She nodded, still unsure why he, who barely spoke to lower-level employees, was paying her so much attention. "I need an executive assistant," he continued. "I've observed your performance and spoken with Carmen. They told me you often take initiative in the store, and that when the manager is absent, you organize the team effectively." Victoria blinked, surprised. She never expected someone like Matthew Lombardi to notice those details. "I also saw you studied administration before leaving university. You don't have the traditional experience for this position, but I have a feeling you can learn quickly." "Are you offering me a promotion?" she asked, still incredulous. "I'm offering you an opportunity," he corrected, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "Mr. Matthew Lombardi's full support has made me a better experience. But after what happened at the party," a barely perceptible smile touched Matthew's lips. "The kiss? It was impulsive and unprofessional, yes. but it also showed initiative and courage, two qualities I value in my employees. He walked to his desk and handed her a folder. Here's the contract. Take the day to review it. If you accept, you start tomorrow. Victoria left the office in a daze. In the restroom, she reread the contract 3 times. The salary was almost triple what she currently earned. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from James Bell. I told you. He just uses people. Be careful. She deleted it without responding. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she had control of her destiny, though a small voice in her head warned her that nothing this good came without a price. What if a dream opportunity plunged you into a world of high stakes and hidden motives, forcing you to question the intentions of the very man who offered you a lifeline? Could you thrive in an environment where every smile might hide a secret agenda? The first month as Matthew Lombardi's executive assistant was a relentless roller coaster. Victoria Miller arrived at the office at 7 a.m. and rarely left before 8 p.m. Her new responsibilities ranged from coordinating meetings with powerful investors to reviewing intricate contracts and groundbreaking proposals for new jewelry collections. Matthew was a demanding but fair boss. He corrected her mistakes without humiliating her and acknowledged her achievements with small, almost imperceptible gestures. A quiet good job here, a brief, approving smile there. Sometimes, he looked at her in a way that made her blush, a fleeting intensity in his gaze, but he always maintained a strictly professional distance. Doesn't it seem strange to you? Laura, her best friend, asked during a quick lunch break, her voice laced with concern. First the kiss, then the promotion. What is he really after? He just wants someone competent, Victoria replied, though a seed of doubt had already been planted in her mind. One afternoon, while organizing documents in the archives room, James Bell suddenly appeared, his presence unwelcome. You look tired, he said, leaning against the doorframe, a smug look on his face. Is it worth being his puppet? I'm no one's puppet, she retorted, trying to brush past him. James gently blocked her path. Did you know his last assistant resigned after an incident? No one knows exactly what happened, but there are rumors. Rumors are just that, Victoria snapped, though she filed the information away in her mind. James's words haunted her for days. She began to notice subtle details. The way Matthew carefully avoided discussing personal relationships, the wary glances some board members cast his way, the calls he abruptly ended when she entered his office. One night, as they were reviewing the quarterly numbers together, Matthew surprised her with a direct question. Why did you really kiss me that night? Victoria felt the air leave her lungs. It was a mistake. I wanted to make James jealous. And did it work? His eyes met hers in the charged silence of the office. The tension between them was palpable, almost electric. I don't know, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. It doesn't matter anymore. Matthew moved closer, his cologne, a subtle blend of sandalwood and citrus, enveloping her senses. For a breathtaking moment, Victoria thought he was going to kiss her. Instead, he took a step back. It's late. You should go home. That night, as she drove back to her small apartment, Victoria understood she was treading on dangerous ground. The attraction she felt for Matthew went far beyond the physical. But James had planted a seed of doubt in her mind, a persistent, nagging question. Did Matthew truly see her as a capable professional, or was she just another pawn in his intricate games of power? What if a glittering gala became the stage for a dangerous confrontation, forcing you to choose between your integrity and the man who held your future in his hands? Could a secret conversation unveil a truth more shocking than you ever imagined? The annual gala showcasing Lombardi & Sons' new collection was the most important event of the year. The grand ballroom of the Peninsula Chicago shimmered with golden lights and cascading crystals, while the elite of Illinois society paraded in their finest attire, adorned with the latest creations from the renowned jewelry house. Victoria Miller, dressed in a navy blue tailored suit that Matthew had insisted on gifting her. It's part of your job to look impeccable, he'd said, meticulously supervised every detail of the event. 3 months in her new position had transformed her into a more confident professional, though her boss's presence still unnerved her, a constant, unsettling thrum beneath her carefully composed exterior. "They're looking for you at table 4? Laura whispered, having recently been promoted to sales coordinator, a move Victoria suspected Matthew had orchestrated. "Mr. Gonzalez wants to place a special order." As Victoria navigated through the crowded tables, she noticed James Bell following her with his gaze. Since their conversation in the archives, he had tried to warn her about Matthew several times, his messages oscillating between feigned concern and thinly veiled threats. "Miss Miller," Matthew's voice startled her. "I need you to accompany me for a moment." He led her to a secluded terrace, away from the glittering chaos. The city stretched beneath them like a sea of twinkling lights. "Is something wrong with the event?" she asked, suddenly nervous by the unexpected intimacy of the moment. The vast, silent city their only witness. "It's time we talked about what's happening between us," he stated, his voice low, serious. Victoria's heart skipped a beat. "I don't know what you mean." "You know perfectly well." Matthew stepped closer, his gaze intense, unwavering. "The kiss at the party, the tension every time we're alone, the glances we exchange when you think I'm not looking. It's just professional." She tried to defend herself, her voice trembling slightly. "Really?" His voice softened, a subtle caress. "Then explain to me why you really kissed me that night. And this time, I want the truth." Victoria felt the words catch in her throat. How could she explain that what had started as an act of bitter revenge had transformed into something far more complex, something far more dangerous? That every day she spent by his side confused her more, drew her closer, terrified her more? "I can't," she finally whispered, her gaze dropping. "Why not?" "Because I'm afraid," she admitted, her voice raw with a vulnerability she rarely showed. "Of ruining everything. My job, my independence." James said. "James." Matthew's expression hardened, his voice turning to ice. "What does he have to do with this?" Before she could answer, the sharp click of heels on the marble floor interrupted them. Carmen, Matthew's executive secretary, appeared at the terrace entrance. "Mr. Lombardi, the investors are waiting for the toast." Matthew nodded, but before leaving, he turned back to Victoria. "This conversation isn't over. I'll expect you in my office first thing tomorrow morning." She was left alone on the terrace, trembling despite the warm spring night. The moment she had dreaded, the confrontation she had tried so desperately to avoid, had finally arrived, and she had no idea how to face it. What if the truth you desperately tried to hide became the foundation for an unexpected proposition, forcing you to navigate a dangerous line between professional ambition and a forbidden attraction? The next morning, Victoria Miller arrived at the office, her stomach a knot of anxiety. She found Matthew Lombardi standing by the window, his silhouette stark against the sprawling cityscape, just as he had been that first time after the impulsive kiss. "Sit down," he said, his voice calm without turning. When she obeyed, sinking into the plush leather chair, he continued. "I've been thinking a lot about our situation." "Matthew, Let me finish," he interrupted, finally turning to face her, his dark eyes unreadable. "You're the best assistant I've ever had. Efficient, intelligent, dedicated. I don't want to lose that." He sat down opposite her, his gaze intense, studying her with an unnerving focus. "But there's also something more," he admitted, his voice dropping slightly. "An attraction we can no longer ignore." Victoria felt her heart leap into her throat. "What are you proposing?" "An agreement," he stated, his voice once again cool, businesslike. "We continue to work together, maintaining a strictly professional relationship during office hours. What happens outside the office is another matter." "Are you proposing a secret affair?" she asked, her voice filled with disbelief, a touch of indignation. "I'm proposing a practical solution," he countered. "We're both adults. We can handle this." Victoria stood, needing to move, to think, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. And what if it doesn't work? What if things get complicated? Matthew moved closer, standing so near she could smell the subtle, expensive scent of his cologne. "Are you afraid you'll end up like the last assistant?" he asked, his voice a low murmur. She looked at him, surprised. "So it's true. There was someone else." "Not like you think," he sighed, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "But that's a story for another time. Right now, I need your answer. Do you accept the agreement?" Victoria knew she should say no. It was risky, unprofessional, and potentially disastrous. But when she looked into his eyes, she remembered all the times she had dreamed of this moment, of him looking at her with that same raw intensity. "I accept," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But with one condition. If at any moment this affects my work or my dignity, I walk away. No drama, no consequences." A ghost of a smile appeared on Matthew's lips. "That seems fair." He stepped even closer, his breath brushing her cheek. "Shall we seal the deal?" The kiss was different from the first. There was no alcohol, no lingering bitterness of revenge. Only contained desire and silent, unspoken promises. When they parted, Victoria noticed her hands were trembling. "Now," Matthew said, his voice instantly reverting to its usual professional tone, as if nothing had happened. "We have a meeting with the designers in 10 minutes. Do you have the sketches ready?" Victoria was stunned by his ability to switch registers so quickly. As she walked out of his office, a strange tingling sensation on her lips, she wondered what she had just gotten herself into. But she also knew, with a chilling certainty, that it was already too late to regret it. What she didn't know was that James Bell, her ex-boyfriend, had seen them through the glass window of Matthew's office, his expression promising trouble. His eyes narrowed with a cold, calculating fury. What if a secret affair, born from a dangerous agreement, began to feel undeniably real, even as the whispers of a treacherous past threatened to shatter your fragile new world? The following weeks unfolded like a fever dream for Victoria Miller. During the day, she maintained a flawless professional facade, working seamlessly with Matthew Lombardi on high-stakes projects and crucial company meetings. But by night, the masks would fall. They met in discreet, dimly lit restaurants or at his sprawling penthouse apartment in Lincoln Park, where they allowed themselves to be simply a man and a woman, drawn together by an undeniable, intoxicating attraction. Everything seemed almost perfect, a precarious balance between her demanding career and this new, secret intimacy. Until James Bell's insidious messages began to arrive with increasing frequency. "Did you know he had an affair with Senator Morales' daughter?" One message read. Another followed days later. "Ask him what happened to Daniela Morales. Why can't he participate in events where her family is present anymore?" Victoria tried to ignore them, to dismiss them as the bitter ramblings of a jealous ex. But the doubts, like insidious weeds, began to take root in her mind. One afternoon, while organizing old company files, a task Matthew had surprisingly delegated to her, she stumbled upon an archived folder from 2 years prior. It contained reports about a scandal that had been quickly, almost too efficiently silenced. The name Daniela Morales appeared multiple times. "Looking for something interesting?" James's voice startled her. He was leaning against the doorframe of the archive room, a chilling, knowing smirk on his face. "What do you want, James?" she asked, quickly closing the file, her heart pounding. "To warn you," he said, his voice deceptively smooth. "Matthew has a pattern. He seduces women who can be useful to him, uses them, then discards them when they're no longer convenient. Daniela was the daughter of one of our biggest investors. When he ended things with her, we almost lost millions in contracts." "That's none of my business," Victoria retorted, though a cold knot of fear tightened in her stomach. "It will be when he discards you like the others." "Do you really think you're special, Victoria? You're just the new distraction of the moment." Victoria tried to push past him, but James gently took her arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "I have proof," he whispered, his voice low and menacing. "Photos, messages, documents. Everything you need to see who he really is." "Let go of me," she demanded, wrenching her arm free. "Think about it," he said as she walked away, his words echoing in her ears. You know where to find me when you're ready for the truth. That night, lying in Matthew's bed, Victoria couldn't sleep. She watched him breathe peacefully beside her. His usually guarded face softened in sleep, and wondered how much of what James said was true. Did she really know the man sleeping beside her? Or was she just another pawn in his intricate games? Can't sleep, Matthew murmured, his eyes fluttering open, pulling her closer. Just thinking, she replied, forcing a smile, burying her doubts deep within her. He held her close, kissing her forehead. Rest. We have a busy day tomorrow. Victoria snuggled against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. She wanted to believe, desperately, that what they had was real, that she wasn't just another Daniela Morales in his life. But James's words, like poisonous thorns, resonated in her mind, sowing seeds of distrust that grew like invasive weeds in a once beautiful garden. What happens when the carefully constructed walls around a man's heart begin to crumble, revealing a hidden pain and a past mistake that threatens to destroy the fragile trust you've built? The doubt gnawed at Victoria Miller like an acid, corrosive and relentless. For an entire week, she avoided their private dinners, making excuses about late work and family commitments. Matthew Lombardi noticed her distance, the subtle shift in her demeanor, but he didn't pressure her, which, in a strange way, unsettled her even more. One night, as they were meticulously reviewing the final details of a crucial presentation, Victoria couldn't contain her turmoil any longer. Who is Daniela Morales? She blurted out, the question hanging heavy in the opulent silence of his office. Matthew froze, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. For the first time since she'd known him, Victoria saw something akin to raw, unadulterated fear flicker in his usually guarded eyes. Who told you about her? He asked, his voice dangerously low. That doesn't matter, she countered, her voice trembling but firm. I want to know the truth. Matthew rose and walked to the minibar in his office, his movements stiff. He poured himself a whiskey and drank a long, slow swallow before speaking, his back still to her. Daniela was Senator Morales's daughter. We met at a charity gala 3 years ago. She was intelligent, beautiful, and very young. He paused, staring out the panoramic window at the glittering city lights. At first, I was clear with her. I told her I wasn't looking for anything serious. But... He stopped, his voice trailing off, a heavy silence filling the room. But I ended up getting more involved than I should have. I let my guard down. I allowed her into my life in a way I later couldn't manage. What happened? Victoria pressed, her heart pounding. She thought it meant something more, Matthew continued, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. And when I tried to create distance, she felt betrayed. Deeply. Did you use her? The question escaped Victoria's lips as a barely audible whisper. Her deepest fear laid bare. No, he responded firmly, turning to face her. His eyes filled with a surprising honesty. I was honest from the beginning. I told her I wasn't looking for anything serious. But sometimes, people see what they want to see, not what's truly there. He walked back to the window, his silhouette stark against the glittering cityscape. Since then, I promised myself never to mix business with pleasure, to keep relationships simple, uncomplicated. Is that what I am? Victoria asked, a knot tightening in her throat. An uncomplicated relationship? Matthew turned to her, his face a mask of carefully contained emotions. You know you're not. With you, it's different. That's why I'm scared. Scared of what? She whispered, stepping closer. That this, he gestured to the space between them, a tangible electric current, is real. That for the first time in my life, I can't maintain control. Victoria stood before him, her gaze searching his. And what if not having control isn't a bad thing, Matthew? He looked at her with an intensity that made her tremble. Victoria, The shrill ring of his cell phone shattered the moment. It was an urgent message from the board of directors. Something about leaked documents and accusations of corporate corruption. The moment of raw vulnerability evaporated. Matthew instantly transformed back into the impenetrable CEO, barking orders, making calls his focus absolute. But something had irrevocably changed between them. A truth had been revealed, a fragile connection acknowledged, and there was no going back. What if the very foundation of a powerful empire was built on lies, and a sudden, devastating storm threatened to expose a web of corruption, dragging everyone you loved into its destructive path? The bombshell exploded on a Monday morning. Chicago's leading newspapers screamed explosive headlines. Corruption scandal rocks Lombardi and Sons. CEO accused of money laundering and fraudulent contracts. Victoria Miller arrived at the office to find it invaded by a swarm of aggressive journalists. At the reception, Carmen, Matthew's unflappable executive secretary, struggled to maintain order as phones rang incessantly, a cacophony of chaos. "Where's Matthew?" Victoria asked, dodging microphones and flashing cameras, her heart pounding. "In the boardroom," Carmen replied, her face tense. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. The leaked documents seemed irrefutable. Suspicious transfers, duplicated invoices, contracts with phantom companies. Everything pointed to an elaborate corruption scheme with Matthew at its center. When she was finally able to see him, hours later, she barely recognized him. His usual impeccable composure had vanished, replaced by a raw tension that made him look years older. "The board is demanding my temporary resignation," he said without preamble, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "While the investigation is underway." "But they can't do that," Victoria protested, her voice filled with disbelief. "This is all ridiculous." "They can and they will," he stated grimly. "The stock is plummeting. Investors are panicking." He sank into his chair, running a hand through his usually perfect hair. "The worst part is," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper, "some of the documents are real, old contracts, meeting records, but they've been manipulated, taken out of context. Who would do something like this?" The question hung heavy in the air, but they both knew the answer. Or at least they suspected. The following days were a relentless whirlwind. The media camped outside the Lombardi and Sons building, their presence a constant, suffocating reminder of the unfolding crisis. Clients canceled orders, and rumors multiplied like a virus, each one more damaging than the last. One afternoon, as Victoria desperately searched through archives, looking for anything that could help, she received a message from James Bell. "Now you see who he really is. Get out before he drags you down with him." Rage consumed her. It all fit. His insistence on warning her, his knowledge of old documents, his obsessive desire to destroy Matthew. But she had no proof, only suspicions and a gut feeling that screamed James was behind it all. "You should go home," Matthew's voice startled her. He was standing in the office doorway, looking utterly exhausted, defeated. "There's no point in you staying so late." "I'm not abandoning you," she responded firmly, her voice unwavering. "Victoria." His voice softened, a flicker of surprise in his weary eyes. "This is going to get ugly, very ugly. I don't want to drag you into this." "I'm already in it," she replied, rising to stand beside him. "And we're going to solve this together." He looked at her for a long moment, as if wanting to memorize her face, her unwavering resolve. "Why are you staying?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Because I believe in you," she responded simply. "And because this isn't the end of the story." What if the fight to save an empire and a man's reputation rested on unmasking a hidden betrayer, forcing you to confront a web of deceit with only courage and a fragile, burgeoning trust as your weapons? The following weeks were a living nightmare. Matthew Lombardi had temporarily stepped down from managing the company, working tirelessly from his penthouse apartment, while his lawyers tried to contain the explosive scandal. Victoria Miller divided her time between keeping the company afloat amidst the chaos and desperately searching for evidence that could exonerate Matthew. Every night, she stayed late, poring over documents, comparing dates, meticulously looking for inconsistencies. "There's something odd about these contracts," she told Matthew one night at his apartment, her voice weary. The signatures are authentic, but the dates don't match the original records. They were surrounded by stacks of papers in his spacious living room, forgotten cups of cold coffee littering the table. James knew these documents, she continued, a sudden realization dawning in her eyes. He had access to them when he was a manager, but he would have needed internal help to manipulate them, to access the digital archives. Do you think he has accomplices within the company? Matthew asked, his voice grim. I'm sure of it. Someone with access to the digital files. Someone who... A sharp knock on the door interrupted them. It was James Bell. Well, he smirked, stepping into the apartment uninvited. How touching. The fallen CEO and his faithful assistant. What do you want? Matthew demanded, rising to his feet, his posture instantly rigid. To offer you a way out, James responded, his voice smooth, confident. Resign permanently from the company. Sell me your shares at a reasonable price, and all of this, he gestured vaguely to the chaos surrounding them, disappears. So that was your plan, Victoria stated, her voice cold, unwavering. Manipulate documents to force a sale? James looked at her with something akin to pity. You were always too naive, Victoria. Did you really think he loved you? You're just part of his strategy to maintain allies within the company. You're wrong, Matthew interrupted, his voice like steel. About everything. Really? James pulled out his phone. I have more documents, emails, conversations, proof of his other shady dealings. A simple message and everything is leaked to the press. Victoria noticed something in his tone, an excessive arrogance that betrayed his weak point. You have nothing more, she said, her voice firm. You've already played your best cards. Whatever you have left isn't enough to truly sink him. James's expression shifted for a split second, a flicker of uncertainty confirming her suspicion. You have 24 hours to decide, he said before leaving. But his threat now sounded hollow, a desperate bluff. When they were alone again, Victoria turned to Matthew. We need to find proof of the document manipulation, and I think I know where to start. Matthew looked at her with a mixture of admiration and profound concern. It's dangerous, he warned. I know, she responded, her voice resolute. But I told you, I'm in this until the end. They looked at each other in silence, acutely aware that the next step could change everything, for better or for worse. What if the key to unmasking a traitor lay in a dangerous gamble, forcing you to lay a trap with your own reputation on the line, and confront a betrayal far more personal than you ever imagined? Victoria knew they had to act fast. With the help of Laura, her friend who worked in the IT department, they began meticulously tracking access to the company's digital archives. Look at this, Laura pointed out one late night, as they reviewed logs in Victoria's small office. Someone accessed the original documents using the login credentials of an executive who left months ago. Who? Victoria asked, her heart pounding. Richard Mendez, the former CFO. Victoria remembered that Richard had resigned suddenly, shortly before the scandal erupted. Can you see which computer made the changes? Laura typed rapidly. Yes, it was from the accounting office at odd hours, when almost no one was around. Teresa, Victoria murmured, the name a chilling realization. James Bell's former assistant. She had access to that office. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Teresa had worked with James for years and remained close to him even after his departure. When Victoria told Matthew Lombardi her discoveries, he became thoughtful. We need Teresa to confess, he finally said. With her testimony and the digital evidence, we can prove the manipulation. And how do we do that? Victoria asked, a knot of apprehension tightening in her stomach. I have an idea, Matthew said, a grim determination in his eyes. But it's risky, and I need you to trust me completely. The plan was simple yet incredibly dangerous. They would spread a rumor that Matthew was considering accepting James's offer, that he was defeated. Teresa, believing their plan had succeeded, would likely lower her guard. I don't like deceiving people, Victoria admitted, a flicker of doubt in her voice. Sometimes you have to play dirty to achieve justice. Matthew responded, taking her hand, his gaze intense. Do you trust me? She looked into his eyes, and despite everything that had happened, despite the lingering doubts and fears, her answer was immediate. Yes, I trust you. The following days were a carefully orchestrated performance. Matthew appeared defeated, a broken man, while Victoria feigned disappointment and distance. The rumor spread like wildfire through the company. As they expected, Teresa began to appear more confident, even arrogant, her relief palpable. One evening, when everyone else had left, Victoria confronted her in the empty accounting office. I know what you did, Victoria said simply, her voice calm but firm. And I have proof. Teresa paled, her eyes darting nervously around the room. I don't know what you're talking about. Victoria pulled out her phone and pressed a button. This is a copy of the access logs to the documents. Only 3 people had permissions. Matthew, the former CFO, and you. Teresa trembled, her composure shattering. James told me no one would find out. The mask finally broke. James promised me a better position. He said it was the only way to get rid of Matthew. Her confession, secretly recorded, was everything they needed. But as Victoria triumphantly left the office, she didn't expect to find James waiting for her in the dimly lit, deserted hallway. Very clever, he said, a cold, predatory smile on his face. But you made one mistake. You trusted too much. What if the enemy you unmasked was driven by a pain far deeper than corporate ambition, and a desperate act of revenge revealed a hidden tragedy that connected you all in ways you never imagined? Victoria's heart hammered against her ribs as James Bell approached her in the dimly lit, deserted hallway. His right hand held something that glinted menacingly under the faint glow of the emergency lights. Give me the recording, he demanded, revealing a small, sharp utility knife, his voice a low, dangerous growl. It's too late, she responded, desperately trying to keep her voice calm, her mind racing. The confession was automatically sent to several email addresses. James laughed, a humorless, chilling sound. Do you think that stops me? When I'm done with you, everyone will think you went crazy defending Matthew, that you fabricated everything. He moved closer, backing her against the cold wall. Victoria could feel the cold metal of the knife against her throat, a terrifying pressure. Why so much hatred? She managed to ask, her voice barely a whisper, desperately trying to buy time. Just for power? Power. James pressed the knife harder, a terrifying glint in his eyes. This is personal. Matthew destroyed my sister. Victoria blinked, confused, her mind struggling to process his words. Your sister, Daniela Morales, my half-sister. The name hit Victoria like a physical blow. When our mother married the senator, I thought we'd finally have the life we deserved. But Matthew ruined everything. Daniela tried to kill herself after he left her. The revelation struck Victoria with the force of a lightning bolt. Everything suddenly, chillingly, clicked into place. James's obsession, his detailed knowledge of Matthew's past, his elaborate, cruel revenge. She didn't die, James continued, his voice cracking, raw with a pain that seemed to consume him. But she was never the same. And now you're just as foolish, believing his lies. You're wrong. A voice cut through the tense silence from behind them. The only liar here is you. Matthew Lombardi appeared in the hallway, flanked by 2 imposing security guards. James, startled, loosened his grip. Victoria seized the opportunity, shoving him away, gasping for breath. We knew you'd try something like this, Matthew said, his voice cold as steel, as the guards swiftly subdued James. That's why we installed new cameras. Everything is recorded. James struggled, screaming threats and accusations, as he was dragged away. Are you okay? Matthew asked, rushing to Victoria's side, gently examining the small, superficial cut on her neck. She nodded, trembling, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Did you know about Daniela? No, he responded, his voice filled with a profound regret. "I never knew she was James's sister. But that doesn't justify what he did." They embraced in silence as the flashing lights of police cars began to illuminate the building, their sirens wailing in the distance. The truth had finally, brutally, come to light, though in a way neither of them could have ever anticipated. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice still shaky. "Now," Matthew replied, kissing her forehead, his voice firm, resolute. "We start over. No more lies, no more secrets. Just us." The sirens grew closer, marking the definitive end of a dark, treacherous era, and the fragile, uncertain beginning of something new, something real, something that, for the first time, wasn't built on deceptions and revenge, but on a hard-won, undeniable truth. What happens when the storm finally passes, leaving behind a trail of shattered reputations and exposed truths? Can a company and a relationship truly be rebuilt on a foundation of honesty and transparency? The morning of the press conference, the lobby of the Grand Hyatt Chicago buzzed with frenetic activity. Journalists from every major media outlet jostled for position, their cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward like weapons. The board of directors of Lombardi and Sons occupied the front row, their faces tense, betraying the gravity of the moment. Victoria Miller reviewed the documents one last time in the quiet waiting room. They had everything: Teresa's recorded confession, the digital logs proving the document manipulation, the security footage of James's attack, and even a signed statement from Daniela Morales, courageously explaining the truth about her past relationship with Matthew. "Ready?" Matthew Lombardi asked, adjusting his tie in the mirror, his reflection showing a man weary but resolute. "I think so," she replied, her voice surprisingly steady. "Are you sure you want me to speak first?" "Completely," he affirmed, turning to her, his gaze unwavering. "You uncovered the truth. You deserve to tell it." The strategy was risky. Instead of letting lawyers handle everything behind closed doors, they had decided to face the press directly. Total transparency. When Victoria stepped up to the podium, the blinding glare of the camera lights momentarily disoriented her. She took a deep breath and began. "Good morning. A month ago, Lombardi and Sons was the victim of an elaborate plan of defamation and extortion." Her voice, initially trembling, grew stronger, more confident, as she laid out the truth. She explained how James Bell had manipulated documents, how he had used his sister's past as an excuse for his personal vendetta, how he had attempted to seize control of the company through blackmail. The journalists listened in stunned silence, furiously scribbling notes. When it was time for questions, Matthew joined her at the podium. "What will happen to James Bell?" a reporter asked, his voice sharp. "He will face charges for document falsification, extortion, and assault," Matthew responded, his voice firm. "The justice system will decide his fate." "And your personal relationship?" Another journalist chimed in, pointing to both of them. "Doesn't that represent a conflict of interest?" Victoria felt her throat go dry, but Matthew calmly took the microphone. "Our relationship began under complex circumstances." "That's true," he admitted, his gaze sweeping across the room. "But it was precisely Victoria's integrity and her unwavering commitment to the truth that saved this company. I see no conflict in that. Only strength." The press conference continued for another hour. When it finally ended, the board of directors approached to congratulate them. The company's stock was already beginning to recover. In the car on the way back to the office, Victoria finally allowed herself to relax. "Do you think it worked?" she asked, her voice filled with a cautious hope. Matthew took her hand, his grip warm and reassuring. "It worked because we told the truth, simple and direct. And now, he smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile, "comes the hardest part, rebuilding everything from scratch." Victoria squeezed his hand, knowing that whatever happened, they would face it together. What if the unmasking of a villain led not just to justice, but to unexpected paths of healing and reconciliation, proving that even the deepest wounds can begin to mend with honesty and compassion? The news exploded across all media platforms. James Bell arrested for fraud and extortion. Images showed him handcuffed, being escorted from his luxurious Gold Coast apartment by police officers. At Lombardi and Sons, the atmosphere was one of cautious optimism. Investors were slowly returning, and orders were gradually picking up. The district attorney has a solid case, the company lawyer explained during a board meeting, as everyone reviewed the extensive documentation. With Teresa's confession and the digital evidence, James will face several years in prison. Victoria observed everything with a mixture of relief and a lingering sadness. Despite everything, she couldn't help but feel compassion for Daniela, the true, innocent victim in this twisted story of revenge. "What are you thinking about?" Matthew asked when they were alone later. "Daniela? Do you think we should talk to her?" Matthew sighed, a heavy weight seeming to lift from his shoulders. "Her therapist says she's improving. Perhaps it's time to properly close that chapter." The meeting was arranged in a quiet, unassuming coffee shop. Daniela Morales was no longer the dazzling young woman from the old photographs, but there was a newfound serenity in her face, a quiet strength that spoke of healing. "I'm sorry I didn't see what James was doing," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I was so lost in my own pain that I didn't realize how he was using it, twisting it." "It wasn't your fault," Victoria responded gently. "Your brother needs help, I know," Daniela said, looking at Matthew. "And he'll get it in prison. Hopefully." Daniela then looked directly at Matthew, a ghost of a smile on her lips. "I don't blame you, you know. Not anymore. We both made mistakes." The conversation was brief but profoundly healing. When they parted ways, a heavy burden had been lifted from all their shoulders. Back at the office, the news continued to arrive. More accomplices of James were being discovered, more documents recovered, the truth emerging layer by painful layer. "The board wants to make changes," Matthew announced that afternoon, a new sense of purpose in his voice. "More transparency, better oversight. And they want you to lead the new internal audit department." Victoria stared at him, stunned. "Me? Who better?" Matthew smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "You know the company inside out, you're meticulous, and you've proven you're not easily intimidated. Don't you think some will see it as a conflict of interest, your girlfriend having so much power?" Victoria asked, a playful glint in her eyes. Matthew's smile widened. "Let them try. We've already proven that together, we're stronger." The sun was setting over Chicago, painting the sky in hues of fiery orange and soft lavender. From the office window, Victoria could see the building where everything had begun, where an impulsive kiss had set in motion this incredible, life-altering story. "You know," she said, a thoughtful expression on her face, "sometimes our biggest mistakes lead us exactly where we need to be." Matthew wrapped his arms around her from behind, both of them gazing at the city that had been the silent witness to their transformation. "It wasn't a mistake," he whispered, his voice filled with a profound tenderness. "It was destiny." What if the ashes of betrayal and scandal became the fertile ground for a new legacy, built not on secrets and power plays, but on shared vision, mutual respect, and a love that dared to redefine the future? The following months brought significant, transformative changes to Lombardi and Sons. Under the joint leadership of Matthew Lombardi and Victoria Miller, the company experienced a profound metamorphosis. The new internal audit department, spearheaded by Victoria, implemented rigorous control systems that guaranteed transparency in every single operation, from sourcing gemstones to final sales. "It's incredible to see how much you've grown," Laura, Victoria's best friend, commented during a rare lunch break. "From sales associate to executive director. Quite a success story." Victoria smiled, remembering her early days behind the jewelry counter, the constant worry, the feeling of being trapped. "Sometimes, I can't believe it myself." The news of Matthew and Victoria's engagement was handled with quiet discretion. A small, tasteful announcement in the society pages. No grand pronouncements, no ostentatious displays. Both preferred to keep their personal lives away from the relentless glare of the media spotlight after everything that had transpired. One afternoon, While reviewing blueprints for the new Guadalajara branch, a project Victoria was passionately championing to ensure ethical sourcing and fair labor practices. Matthew received an unexpected letter. "It's from James," he said, surprised, his brow furrowing as he read. "He's in rehabilitation at the prison." Victoria tensed, a flicker of old apprehension returning. "What does it say?" "He's apologizing," Matthew replied, a note of disbelief in his voice. "He says he's finally getting help to manage his anger and resentment." The letter was long, detailed, and surprisingly sincere. James admitted that his obsession with revenge had destroyed his life and hurt those he loved, especially his sister. "Will you respond?" Victoria asked softly. "I don't know yet," Matthew admitted, his expression thoughtful. "Some wounds need more time to heal." The work continued. The company expanded, but in a more conscious, ethical manner. Victoria insisted on implementing training programs for employees who wanted to grow professionally, remembering her own early struggles, her own unfulfilled dreams. "I want everyone to have the opportunity one was given," she explained during a board meeting, her voice filled with a quiet, passionate conviction. One evening, as they were having dinner in the small apartment where their tumultuous journey had truly begun, Matthew surprised her with a proposition. "What do you think about using part of our profits to create university scholarships for employees?" Victoria looked at him, her eyes shining with pride. "Are you serious?" "Completely," he affirmed, a warm smile on his face. "We could call it the New Beginnings program." It was more than just a scholarship program. It was a powerful symbol of how second chances could transform lives, a testament to their own improbable journey. The board of directors approved the initiative unanimously. The first beneficiary was Carmen, Matthew's executive secretary, who could finally finish her business administration degree, a dream she had long deferred. "You see," Victoria said that night, as they prepared for bed, a comfortable intimacy settling between them. "Sometimes the best ideas are born from crises." Matthew held her close, his heart filled with a profound sense of peace. "Do you regret anything?" he asked, his voice a low murmur against her hair. "That impulsive kiss that started it all?" She laughed softly. "Never. It was the best mistake of my life." The company, like them, had emerged stronger from the crisis. The wounds of the past were slowly transforming into scars that told a story of redemption, resilience, and profound growth. What if the most beautiful celebrations weren't about extravagant displays, but about the quiet triumph of a love that endured, a family reborn, and a future built on the unwavering foundations of truth, forgiveness, and shared dreams? The wedding took place in the serene garden of an old hacienda in Cuernavaca, a tranquil escape from the bustling city. There was no press, no glittering array of business personalities, just close family and true friends. Victoria had insisted on something intimate, a celebration of their love, not their status. And Matthew, to the surprise of many who still remembered his former self, had wholeheartedly agreed. "Nervous?" Laura, Victoria's maid of honor, asked, adjusting her friend's simple veil. "Strangely, no," Victoria replied, looking at her reflection in the antique mirror. Her dress was simple but elegant, like herself, a testament to quiet confidence. In the front row, her mother wept tears of pure happiness. Thanks to the new treatment which they could now comfortably afford, her health had improved considerably. Beside her, Carmen, Matthew's loyal secretary, smiled, proud to see how far her former colleague had come. As Victoria walked towards the makeshift altar, beneath a canopy of fragrant bougainvillea, she remembered that first chaotic gala, the impulsive kiss, the ensuing crisis, the doubts, the fears, the victories. Every single step had led her to this precise, perfect moment. Matthew waited for her, a smile on his face that few had ever seen, the one reserved only for her. He wasn't the powerful CEO, the feared businessman. He was simply the man who had learned to love and trust again, the man who had, against all odds, captured her heart. "When I kissed you that night," Victoria said during her vows, her voice clear and strong, "it was an act of rebellion, of wounded pride. I didn't know I was kissing my destiny. And when I received that kiss, Matthew responded, his own voice thick with emotion, I thought it was just another problem I'd have to solve. I never imagined it would be the solution to everything I was missing. The reception was as intimate as the ceremony. There were no elaborate waltzes or pompous speeches. Instead, there was sincere laughter, warm hugs, and heartfelt toasts. During their first dance as husband and wife, Matthew surprised her with another piece of news. The board approved your proposal, he whispered, his eyes shining. We're going to open a foundation to support young entrepreneurs. Seriously? Victoria hugged him, overjoyed. When were you planning to tell me? I wanted it to be my wedding gift, he replied, a playful glint in his eyes. Though technically, it was your idea. It was true. Victoria had presented the project weeks ago, inspired by her own story. The Lombardi Foundation would support talented individuals without resources, giving them the opportunity she had once so desperately needed. As they danced under the stars, surrounded by the people they loved most, Victoria thought about how much her life had changed in such a short time. What are you thinking about? Matthew whispered, holding her close. That sometimes chaos isn't the end, she replied, a serene smile on her face. Sometimes it's just the beginning of something beautiful. The night progressed, and with it, the start of a new chapter. They didn't know what the future held, but they were certain of one thing. They would face it together, with the same strength and love that had united them in the first place. And so, amidst soft music and dim lights, Victoria and Matthew began their own love story, one that had been born from chaos but now blossomed in the peace of knowing they were exactly where they were meant to be. What if the greatest legacy wasn't a name etched in stone, but a life built on courage, transformed by love, and dedicated to creating a future where hope and opportunity blossomed for all? A year after the wedding, Lombardi and Sons had transformed completely. The once traditional family jewelry business was now a benchmark for innovation and social responsibility in Chicago. The Lombardi Foundation had already benefited more than 50 young entrepreneurs, and the employee scholarship program was in its second successful generation. Victoria walked through the company hallways, her 6-month baby bump barely visible under her elegant tailored suit. Employees greeted her with genuine affection. She was no longer the timid sales associate or the distant executive director, but a leader who had earned their unwavering respect. This came for you, Carmen said, handing her an envelope. It was a letter from Daniela Morales. I'm glad to hear you'll be a mother, she wrote. James is doing better. Therapy is helping him heal. Maybe someday he can apologize in person. Matthew found her in her office, reading the letter, a thoughtful expression on her face. Are you okay? He asked, concerned. Better than okay, she smiled. Just thinking about how one moment can change an entire life. Are you referring to a certain impulsive kiss? He teased, pulling her into a gentle embrace. I'm referring to all the decisions we made afterward, she corrected, her voice soft. To how we chose to face each crisis, each challenge. The afternoon sun was setting over Chicago, painting the sky in hues of gold and rose. From the office window, they could see the building where it had all begun, where an impulsive kiss had set in motion this incredible, life-altering story. You know what Laura told me this morning? Victoria commented, leaning against him. That our story seems like a telenovela. Matthew laughed. With a villain included and everything? With the difference that, in our story, even the villain has a chance at redemption. They held each other in comfortable silence, feeling the small, gentle movements of the baby they awaited. Their love story had been born from chaos, had survived betrayal, and had blossomed in the midst of a storm. Do you ever regret it? Matthew asked, his voice a low murmur. Kissing you that night? Never, she whispered against his chest. It was the best mistake of my life. The future stretched before them, full of possibilities. The company grew, their love matured, and soon their family would expand. They had learned that the best stories aren't those that unfold without problems, but those where love is strong enough to overcome any obstacle. And so, As the sun set over the city that had witnessed their extraordinary story, Victoria and Matthew knew that their greatest adventure was just beginning. Because sometimes, the end of one story is simply the beginning of an even better one. Dear friends, if you've enjoyed this passionate love story between Victoria and Matthew, where an impulsive kiss triggered a series of events that transformed not only their lives but also Lombardi and Sons, don't forget to give this video a like and share it with your friends. This story shows us that sometimes, our biggest mistakes can become the best decisions of our lives. If you want more stories like this, where love triumphs over adversity and second chances are possible, don't hesitate to subscribe to our channel and tell us in the comments, where are you watching this story from? We'd love to know where these stories of love, redemption, and personal growth resonate.